The following program was paid for by the friends and partners of Neil Thomas Ministries.
Christianity is about a relationship with God, about knowing Him and having a relationship with Him. And I wanted to read to start tonight from Psalm 139, and Erica quoted from there when she was praying tonight. King David, amazing man, because he didn't get to be baptized. He lived before the cross. Prophecies came out of his mouth so accurate about Jesus Christ, about his death and how he would die, about the sacrifice he would make. Very accurate. Takes a bit of study, can't show you all that in one night, but the Old Testament is full of hundreds of prophecies of Christ. One theologian puts it, who's a bit of a mathematician, that it's like one in some billions and billions chance that Jesus could fulfill as accurately as he did all the prophecies written about him in the Old Testament. We don't just believe this book because somebody told us to. When you really look into it, it just all adds up in miraculous ways. It all adds up in miraculous ways. There's even one passage that talks about the number of days it will be from the rebuilding of Jerusalem to Jesus riding the donkey into Jerusalem, and it was exactly to that day. And that prophecy was made hundreds of years before. And yet the Holy Spirit organised Jesus to be on that donkey on that exact day. Many prophecies, amazing. Well, this is one of those that wrote those prophecies. We're reading David. He had this deep desire for this relationship with God, even that Pastor Sonia was talking about this morning. It says in Psalm 139 verse 1, "O Lord, you've searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. For there's not a word on my tongue, and behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You've hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high I can't attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts, and you covered me in my mother's womb. I'll praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God, how great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God, and depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men. For they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you, and do not I loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred, and I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." God's deeply committed to a relationship with you. Sometimes we think not. Sometimes because he hasn't done what we think he should do. Sometimes because those enemies, as David refers to here, those voices come and speak and tell us otherwise. But David said, I hate those voices. I don't want anything to do with those voices. David was a man like Job. He shunned evil. He said, I don't want anything to do with it. Pushed it away. I don't want to have a part of them because I know God's commitment to me. I'm not going to listen to those lies. I know his commitment to me. And you know what? We've been lied to. Mankind have been lied to. Satan is the deceiver, and he deceives. He has no power now because Jesus has defeated him. But he deceives us into letting him have power. He deceives us into allowing him to work in our life. The only reason that people don't know God is not because Satan is strong, but because he deceives. He has them thinking wrong. He has them thinking wrong. He's very angry. He goes about the earth because he's been defeated. He's been kicked out of heaven, and he can no longer accuse mankind before God. God is at peace. The Father sits on his throne, not worried about anything. Not worried about sin, not offended at people's behaviour, not disturbed by mankind. He's at peace. His Son has dealt with it all. God the Father is at peace. He's not upset about sin. He's not punishing sin. He's not going after sin. See, Satan's got us deceived because some religions get up and tell us. Some churches get up and tell us that God is angry at this and going after sin. No, he's not. The Father is at peace. He's sitting on his throne and looking to see who Christ brings him, waiting, looking for the bride, as Sonia said, to be presented to him, to meet his Son's wife. And that's you and me. He's just waiting to meet us and looking at us and seeing us through his Son and hearing about us and viewing us through the eyes of his Son, through what his Son presents to him about us. And that's only the things that are of Jesus Christ. Sin is not a problem to God anymore. And so now God is able to look at us and know us and enjoy the book about us. This commitment to us, he's able to live with us. He's able to share it with us. You know, we're born needing relationships. We're born to have relationships. We're all about relationships. I wrote an article once that we are the sum of our relationships. You are what you are today, as all the relationships you've ever had have made you who you are today. Your relationships, the people that you've known, the way you've been treated, the friends that you've chosen, who your parents were, what was said to you from the moment you came out of the womb. Scientists tell us that even in the womb we hear conversations, we hear arguments. We're born knowing the smell of our mother and the voice of our father. The voice of our Father. We know that voice. Last Wednesday, I had Sarah El-Sheikh in my hands, trying to get her attention and a smile out of her, trying to get her to look at me and not everywhere else, as you do, because you want if that baby smiles at you, everything's well in the world, you know. If she approves of me, I'm approved. So I was trying to get Sarah's approval, and all she could hear was Tamuse's voice, and she just kept looking over her shoulder. I would say, Tamuse, leave the room so your daughter will look at me. She could just hear Dad's voice. She could hear his voice. When she's hungry, she's looking for her mother's smell. She's looking for her mother. But she was in a place of satisfaction and she was tuned into her dad's voice. We're born to have relationships and we seek relationships, and relationships end up making us who we are. What's said to us, what we learn, what we hear, it affects the person that we are. You can take a little African boy, and he's born black African, and you put him in, and he spends his life in an Australian home or in a European home, and he just grows up thinking, talking, acting that way by the environment that he's around. That becomes the person that he is. Now, he might have some interest and want to go back and know his roots and find some personality traits, or he might react to those voices and react to those relationships. You can take 3 children and put them in the same family and the parents relate to them the same. The children aren't identical because the way they react to those relationships will be different, but the relationships have had an effect on every one of them. Where are some of the relationships? We're looking to relate to people from when we're born. We need to from when we're born. And that's the same way with God. We're actually born needing a relationship with God. And there's one part of us that has to relate to God, and he's the only one that can meet that need. He's the only one that can meet that need. And everyone on earth is born with a need to have a relationship with God. And only he can meet that need. And they look for it in other things, but only he can meet that need. And so often they end up near the end of their life old and unhappy because all that they tried to do to meet that need, now their life's come to an end and they're angry about it. Because they haven't got to know him. They haven't got to meet him. You were made for a relationship with God. You were made to get married to him, as we heard this morning. You were made to get married to his Son, Jesus Christ, so that you could know the Father and come into a relationship with him. This week in college, we had devotions from 3 of our year 3 male students, Neil Thomas, John Riego, Stephen Rano shared with us, and they're all kind of about that, about relationships with God. John mentioned to us the importance of regularly talking and reading and communicating, having a relationship with God. And when he doesn't, the effect it's had on him when he's gotten slack about having that relationship. You know, Christianity is a relationship. It's not a set of rules. It's not a bit of conduct. It's not attending meetings and just getting there and that'll do the job. It's not just sitting in the pews here and falling asleep or looking at your phone. It's a relationship with God. The meetings are to help that relationship. That's all. The meetings are about making that relationship better later on during the week. You've got to be in a relationship with God. You've got to be talking and praying with him. Neil talked to us about God being first. You know, we're made to have a relationship, and Neil unbuttoned his shirt, much to all the girls' pleasure, I think. But he unbuttoned his shirt in college and buttoned it up with one shirt missing. I won't do that to you tonight because women and children will run screaming from the building. But if I undo this button and then do all the others up, of course, the whole thing's like this. It's all skew-whiff. And it's like the other buttons might be other relationships, but God's the first button. And if you jump him, it all just remains out of whack. And there's a relativity amount of function. The body is covered, but it's all out of order. It's not right. It doesn't work. The person looks a little odd. Well, God has to be. He's the number one relationship. And none of the others can fix him up because he's that first button. And Stephen talked about the things that happen to us in our life. Stuff happens, bad relationships, struggles, difficult relationships, and they affect us. And Stephen talked about how God can take those things and use them and make them to actually equip you and make you the person that he wants you to be. But you've got to be in a relationship with him. And everybody's out there having stuff happen, and it's not all good. We've all got a sad story to tell. No matter who you are, where you are, people always got problems. Sometimes when you see someone else's problem, you don't worry so much about your own, huh? You think, well, I don't really have problems. We're talking on Friday night with Mari and Lewis LeBon, and they made mention that they'd seen a video of Nick Vujicic, the man with no arms and no legs, and his love for God and what God's done for him in his life, and it just changes what you worry about. Well, we had Nick come and speak here, and I remember actually having to lift him and move him, pick up this man with no arms or legs, and hope I wasn't going to drop him or break him. Just being with him really affected you. You thought his attitude, he's lived his life with no arms or legs. It's just amazing. You know, what have I got to worry about? I don't have any of those sort of handicaps, none of my things, and you're spurred up for about 5 days. And then you're back thinking, gee, I have it hard. It comes back, it troubles us. God can take all of that, what we think is going to hold us back, and actually mould us and make it and turn it. God can work all things together to good. To those that love him and are called according to his purpose, but you've got to be in relationship with him. The relationship's got to be happening. As Sonia talked about it this morning. John chapter 14, verse 15 reads, "If you love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, keep my sayings. And I'll pray the Father, and he'll give you another helper, that he may abide with you forever." Verse 21 reads, "He who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him." You've got to be in relationship with Jesus. You've got to be loving Jesus. You've got to be loving Jesus. I remember when my wife and I were fairly newly married, and we were at a wedding, and the father of the groom was there, and we'd never met him. He'd come from interstate, and he was talking about his church and all the things he does in his church. Actually, he was talking to Sonia, and I was talking to someone else, but I was listening to their conversation. He wasn't talking to me at all. And I'm listening in, and he's going on about his church, and all he does for his church is community work. And Sonia said, "Can I just ask you a question? Do you love Jesus?" And he said, "Oh, I don't. No one's ever asked me that. I don't know how to answer that question." She said, "Because all that you're doing is really good and much appreciated by the people that you're helping, but you've got to love Jesus. You've got to love Jesus. You've got to love him. You've got to be loving him. It's about loving him." So I've got to look in my heart. You've got to look in your heart and ask yourself the question, do I love Jesus? And if you don't know, hey, that's serious. Don't leave without knowing whether you love Jesus. Because if you love me, he says, you'll keep my word, and then my Father and I will come and love you and disclose ourselves to you. You got to love him. You got to love him and want to keep him and keep his word. You got to love him like the bride that really wants the man. I love Sonia's example this morning, and the Bible talks about us as being betrothed. You know, betrothal is more than just, we have engagement, and in some of our minds, engagement is just an intention to be married, and for some people, engagement is just to see if they want to marry the person. But when the Bible talked about us being betrothed, that's it. There's a commitment being made. You've been signed over. You are going to marry this person. To break it's really serious. It's like a divorce. You're betrothed. You're committed. It's going to happen. And while Sonia was talking, it made me think of Stephen and Jessie Rano. It made me think of Jessie. Jessie was just always going to marry Stephen. She was just always going to marry him. And talk about not looking at anyone else. Sonia said, don't look at... there's ever been anybody else. I never saw Jessie and others even look at another guy. I never saw anybody even try. I don't think because they thought Stephen would beat him up. He wasn't always the biggest bloke, but they just knew she's got eyes for no one else. She has eyes for nobody else. She's not going... Don't even bother asking Jessie out. She's going to give you the quick flick. She's after Stephen Rano. She's not interested. And then, when she was going out with Stephen Rano, that was, they started going out young, several years. Maybe I can win her off him, or he's sort of neglecting her a bit maybe. Maybe there's opportunities. There's never an opportunity. It's never going to happen. She was betrothed in her heart. It was never, ever going to happen. She was never going to leave. Never. And that's how we're the bride. That's how we've got to be towards Jesus. We've got to love him and committed. Never, nothing, ever. Not going to let anything come near. Going to keep his commandments. Going to take his word and keep them. Keep them. Hold them. I'm going to keep them. I'm going to hang on to them. I'm going to live by them. Because I love him. Because I love him. Not because I have to. Not because some rule, but because I love him. I'm sure friends said to Jessie sometimes, you don't have to put up with that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do what Stephen likes. You shouldn't have to wait for Stephen, whatever. You shouldn't have to go where he wants to go. You shouldn't have to put off but she loved him. So she did, because she loved him. She wanted to do what would please Stephen, as Sonia said this morning. She wanted to do what would please him. She wanted to do what he wanted. She wanted him. She didn't want anything to come between that wedding day with Stephen, because she really desired him. Verse 23 of John 14 says, Jesus answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. He who does not love me does not keep my words, and the words which you hear are not mine, but the Father's who sent me. There's not a lot of option there, is there? Jesus' words aren't really optional. Jesus' words to us aren't optional. They're from our lover, and they're part of our love relationship, keeping his words. It's part of loving him. So if that makes you feel, well, I guess I have to read his words and keep them then, okay, don't bother. You've got to come to that place where you love him and you want to keep his words, because you love him, because you desire him. Now, it doesn't mean at times it's not hard to keep his words. It's not challenging. It's not some sacrifice to keep his words. It's not some pain where someone might say, that looks hard. Are you finding that hard? Yeah, I'm finding it hard, but I want to do it. I want to keep his words. I love him. Times it's hard to love your husband. Sometimes it's challenging to love your husband. Sometimes it's sacrificial to love your husband or your wife, to love your partner. But we're the bride. It's hard sometimes. It's sacrificial for us to love Jesus. But if we really want to love him, we're going to keep his words and we're going to love him, because he's that important to us. Jesus is asking us tonight. He's asking you, marry me. Sonia said it. Jesus asked the question, will you marry me? Will you live with me? Will you accept my offer? And it starts, as Pastor Sonia said, as a date. And the date begins with a prayer. Jesus, come into my life. And the relationship begins. Now, you might hear me speaking tonight, you might be here and you might think, I don't even know what all this marriage is going to require of me. I don't know what being with him is going to require. I don't really know him that well. Well, that's right. So he says to us, just come to me. Let's just start the relationship. Confess me before men. I'll confess you before my Father in heaven and the relationship will begin. There's a dating, there's an engagement, and then there's a marriage. There's a getting to know. And in the getting to know time, we read in Ephesians this morning, he washes us and he cleanses us and he actually prepares us for the wedding day. He has a relationship with us and he prepares us. He begins to talk to us. He begins to wash us with his words. He begins to work in our life and make us. It says he makes us a beautiful bride ready to present to the Father in heaven. He does that work in us as our betrothed. He's our husband, to be, if you like. The final wedding hasn't happened. We haven't finally shaken off our flesh and totally married to him with no humanity in the way. That day's coming. But we're betrothed to him. We belong to him. He's our betrothed one. He's our husband, if you like. When a couple are engaged, I'll often say, where's your husband? I mean, they're not married yet, but you call them their husband. Where's your wife? Because they're committed. They're betrothed. There's no turning back. They're going to get married. They're going to do the service. They're married. In their hearts, they've made the commitment. They've made the commitment. They're on that journey. It started off with a point of engagement. Started off with the point of saying, yes, I accept your offer. And that's what we're inviting in this church people to do. We're here about bringing people into a relationship with God, to know him and walk with him and talk with him, like we heard this morning, to be in love with him. Yes, we want them to deal with the bad things in their life. We want them to be delivered. We want them to be set free. And we see people in human problems and human difficulties, and we know that Jesus can help them. We know that the name of Jesus can cast that demon out. We know that the name of Jesus can heal that person. And there's many testimonies of that in this church. But there's testimonies of people that have been healed at this altar but not pursued a relationship with God. There's people that have been delivered from demons but still don't pursue a relationship with God. Had their business prayer answered but don't pursue a relationship with God. Because we're not just about healing you, delivering you, or blessing your business, because that's all going to come to an end one day. The body we healed will one day die. The business we blessed, you'll one day leave. It's going to finish. You've got to get into this relationship with God. You've got to love him. You've got to love Jesus. You've got to know him and you've got to love him and know what it means to love him and to do what he says to you. To know that his life is here for you. To know what it means to forgive. To walk in love and forgiveness. To understand that. There's some scary words in here from Jesus about forgiveness. Some parables where he says at the end of the parables, if you don't forgive your brother from your heart, your Father will cast you away. What's it mean to love him and keep his word? What does that mean? Well, you've got to get to know him and find out what those words are. You got to get into relationship with him. You come to Jesus, even Eric and Zoe baptised tonight. We're not interested in handing them now a list of things they have to do. He said, just get to know him, Eric. Get to know him, Zoe. Get to know this new life inside of you and it will speak to you. As we sang this morning, it will change you from the inside out. We're not interested in telling you what you've got to do with your outside. We want you to get to know Jesus on the inside and then let the outside take care of itself. Oh, someone will say, they need to stop that. They're doing this. It's not good for them as a Christian. Oh, it's not good as a person. They need to change this. They need to stop that. You know, some people come to the Lord with things they want to get out of their life. Those things go quickly because they've always wanted them out. Other things they don't think, I don't see it, I don't recognise it, I don't know that I need to deal with it. Well, just follow after the Holy Spirit and he will deal with what he needs to deal with. He'll change you from the inside out. He'll clean you from the inside out. He will make that difference in your life. Friend, if you've known Jesus for a long time, then I just felt tonight we just need to continue the message from this morning and ask you, do you love him? How much do you love him? Is your Christianity about what you can and cannot do, your rights? I should have a right to do this. I've counselled marriages and I tell you, it's so hard counselling a marriage where the wife just sits there demanding her rights as a wife. Or the man, the other way round. But again, tonight's example is a man and a woman. I've seen it from men and women. But you're in the relationship and the man wants to love her, but all she is what he needs to be doing for her. And what my right is as a wife. And I shouldn't have to put up with this, this and the other thing. You think, miserable, poor man. She's not in this to love him. She's in this to get. She's in this for what's her right. And of course, you have some rights in a relationship, some basic expectations. But when it's all about your rights, and what he needs to do for me, and that's how some of us are with God. What's my rights? What am I allowed to do as a Christian? And I'm still free to do this. Of course you're free. You're free to do whatever you want. And Sonia was right this morning. I don't want my wife to be doing stuff because she has to, grumpily, miserably, forced. I don't want her doing things to me she doesn't want to do for me. I don't want her serving me in ways she doesn't want to serve me. I'd just rather do it myself. If the love's not there to want to do this for me, then don't do it. Then don't do it. And that's how God is. If you don't love me enough to keep away from that or not do that or not play with that, keep away from those evil spirits, keep away from that company, keep that out of our relationship, keep that out of our home. If you can't believe me, if you can't recognise my word, if you can't hear what I'm saying, then go do what you want to do. But then, of course, that creates a distance in the relationship. And when there's a distance in the relationship, then things aren't what they should be and we're complaining, where's God? Why isn't he doing what I want him to do in my life? Why aren't I feeling what others are feeling? Why isn't he working the way he works for other people? Well, because your relationship's distant. You don't love him. You're not keeping his word. You're not committed to the relationship. You're in this for what you can get out of it. And that's not what Jesus has come for. Jesus hasn't come down so God can just meet all our needs like some sort of Santa Claus, or because God just wants to meet people's needs. God does want to meet people's needs. God does care about people, but he wants a relationship with them. He wants to marry them. He wants intimacy with you. He wants to belong to you. He wants to walk and talk with you in everything. The founder puts it beautifully. My dad puts it, if he's not number one, he's number none. The Bible tells us he's a jealous God. He's come to marry people, not to be their good friend, not to be their best man, not to be their mate, not to be their acquaintance. He's come to marry them and be in an intimate relationship with them. And the cares of life and the busyness of life and other relationships can demand time from us and pull us away from that relationship. And the concern is, the longer we're here, that's what starts to happen. As we go on through life, things can start to pull us away from God and pull us away from that relationship with God. And where we should be growing closer, we start to grow apart. It happens in marriages, doesn't it? It's pressure of life and things and stuff that happens causes the people to grow apart instead of growing closer together. But with God, we're supposed to be growing closer and closer and closer, not apart, not cold, not boring, not dull. You find Christianity boring? Well, then you don't love Jesus. You're not in love with him. Your love has slackened off. Your love has slackened off. Read magazines and they give advice on, how to bring life and interest back into your marriage. Your marriage is dull. You're finding the relationship boring. Well, what are you in the relationship for? To be interested, to be served by it, for it to interest you, for it to excite you, for it to bring good things to you. You're not loving your partner. Well, it's the same with God. We're not loving him. He wants us to love him, and he sent his son for us to love him. And he put out that invitation that we heard this morning, marry me. And if you could see him for what he is. We watched over the years Jesse absolutely smitten. We say the old saying is smitten, my mum would say, smitten by Stephen Rano. We watched it. And some girls would say, what does she see? When they were young teenagers and he didn't do all the right romantic things, but Jessie bore with him, they'd say, why does she put up with this? This poor 16-year-old boy, but anyway, the other 16-year-olds that all knew about love and life would think, why does she put up with this? What does she see in him? Or they can see what they don't like about him. But all she knew was, I love him. I want him. I love him. I want to be with him. I believe in him. I love him. Well, that's what God's looking for from us. Yeah, people look on and they wonder, what do you see in this? Why do you do that? Because I love him. Why do you put up with that? Because I love him. Because I love Jesus. Sonia put it well this morning. You know, if your service in the church, your service in ministry is based on anything else but your love for Jesus, you're a good target for the devil. You're a good target for the old boyfriend, as she called him, to come along and say, how's things with this new man? Pretty tough, huh? What he expects of you, huh? No fun like you used to have with me. None of this, none of that. And you hear Christians saying, well, I'm free. I can have a little bit of that back from the old life. I can have a little of this back from the old life. What are they saying to their lover? You're a bit dull. I need a little bit of drink. I need a little bit of party. I need a little bit of fun. I just need to let this go a little bit. I need a little bit of time with this crowd that don't know God or want anything to do with him because, I get something when I'm there that I'm not getting from you. Well, if you need to go over there and get something because you're not getting it from Jesus, you don't know him. And Jesse would say to those other girls, you're just all blind. You don't know him. You can't see him. You don't understand how wonderful he is. You just can't see it. Pity you. Good for me, I see it. I'm the only one after him, I guess. But Jesse could say, you guys just can't see what I can see. You guys just can't see what I can see. Well, that's how it is with Jesus. If you can see him for who he is and see what he has to offer, then you will love him. You will be in love with him. And there's stuff that gets in the way. Things get in the way. Things of the world, our view, hurts, past things, our ideas, voices, culture. All these lies from Satan get in the way and deceive us from recognizing Jesus for who he is, for putting into that love relationship what we need to put into it, for loving him, keeping his words, for hearing him and understanding him and seeing the beauty of our lover. We get blinded. I've counselled relationships that are in a bad way and I'm thinking this is a really good woman, but he just can't see it. He's actually kind of grown to despise her. He can't see it. He's a really good man, but she can't see it. All she can see is her perceived ideas of his weaknesses. All she can see is what doesn't seem to meet her need. All she can see is what other voices are telling her. Maybe her mother always said, never get a man like this. She did, and now all she can see is that fault. All she can see is all that the world's telling her that he's not. All she can see is what the magazines he's not measuring up to. All she can see is this negative. And I say, there's people are outside and they're not in here today because all they can see is the negativity. All they can hear is what the devil tells them is negative about being a Christian. They just can't see Jesus for who he is. All the churches in this city would be packed to overflowing if people could see who Jesus was. Us, everybody. People would be pressing into anyone that's even going to mention him, whether how good they are or not. If Jesus is going to be lifted up, they'd be there because they're in love with him. If something was going on and Stephen was going to star, Jessie was going to be there. Especially if there were going to be other girls there admiring him, she was definitely going to be there. She's going to be there. She's going to be there because she's going to be there to clap the loudest and adore and approve of him. Well, if you could see Jesus for who he is, it's not hard to get to church. It's not hard to want to be with him. It's not hard to pray and read your Bible. Now, of course, someone says, I'm finding it hard to pray and read. That is the evil one. That is the devil who wants to deceive us and keep us away from it. But you know what? When you really love him, it's not hard. It's not hard to want to. It's not hard to desire him. We need our eyes open to see him as he is. We need our eyes open to be in love with him. We need to ask the Holy Spirit to stir up in us our love for Jesus Christ. To get back to the basics. We're busy asking him to fix this and fix that and do this and do that. We've got all these goals and we've got all these things we want to happen in our life. In the world you will have trouble, Jesus says. But I've overcome the world. In the world you'll have trouble, but I have a peace to give you that the world can't give. It's the man saying to the woman, things will get tough, but it'll be okay. It's all going to be okay with me. It's all going to be okay. We'll have each other. We'll be together. We might not have all the money everyone's telling us we should have, but we'll have each other. We might not live in the best house, but we're going to have each other. It's going to be okay because we've got each other. What matters is that we're together. When a girl really loves a guy and a guy a girl, that's actually true. Their happiness is based on being with each other. Everything else is a bonus. Not based on being with each other in the right house or in the right job or in the right town or driving the right car. It's just being with that person. Because you love him. So just being with Jesus. Knowing him and knowing his love for us, so we accept his invitation.
If you have been blessed by this message, please visit our website, neilthomasministries.com, and click on the donate button.